Welcome to the Calipar Bros podcast. I'm your host, Terrence, and with me is my co-host, Jason, calling in from the back cave in Indianapolis. Jason, how are you, my good man?
Hey, man, I'm doing really good. It's always good that we come to this time every week to record another episode of our favorite podcast. So I'm ready to get into it, bro. Our 3 good topics as usual. Let's go.
Yes, sir. It's episode 72 of the Calipar Bros podcast. For the uninitiated, Calipar Bros is the podcast to hear. We are a weekly podcast for fans of sports, current events, and entertainment.
And as always, we are your hosts, Terrence and Jason. And every single Thursday, we come to you with a brand new episode where we discuss the current events of the day, sports, and the athletes we love.
And even some of the athletes we love. No matter the topic, you can expect a brutally honest and fun exchange of snark while learning through the lens of our 30 years of friendship that originated in Calumet Park, Illinois.
And folks, for more Calipar Bros content, make sure you connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok under the handle Calipar Bros or Calipar Bros Podcast for more behind the scenes of the show and just engage with us every single day. But do not forget, the Calipar Bros Podcast is available to listen to and subscribe for free wherever you listen to podcasts.
Like us, love us, share us, follow us. And folks, if you like us, hell, why don't you?
And like Terrence said, we are the podcast you hear and watch, so make sure you're living it, loving it, and doing it.
Yes, sir. All right, we're going to kick off the show. First segment, let's get into this Biden administration student loan cancellations, dog. I mean, for once in a politician's life, they actually made good on a campaign promise, Jason.
Yeah, but not everybody likes it, though.
Listen. So this broke, I want to say, literally last Wednesday, or Thursday rather, that some version of the student loan package was going to be effectively canceled. And this is all on the Biden administration making this judgment call. Up to $10,000 for those who qualify. And if you got, I believe, any Pell Grant money during your time in college, you're up to $20,000 in federal student loan forgiveness. So, to Jason's point, not everybody likes it, and I'll start by saying, frankly, I don't give a damn. Especially if you're somebody that's been up until COVID, when a lot of these loans were effectively put in suspended animation. They were effectively suspended. They weren't incurring any more interest. If you had been paying your student loans faithfully, let's say the last 5 years, the last 10 years, whatever, dog, you've done your time. Okay? You know, you're in your 30s, your 40s, in some cases. These poor schmucks, and I'm saying as one of those poor schmucks, and you've done your time, and you've paid into the system, and you've kept the balance up to date. I'm like, okay, you don't have to prove anything anymore. And I think it's a step in the right direction. It's not 100% debt cancellation, not debt cancellation, but federal student loan debt cancellation. And more importantly, there's actually something in there about, well, if you make a certain amount of money anyway, well, you're not going to qualify. This is meant for a majority of individuals that frankly would be saddlebagged if they were to effectively take this debt into the next decade. I think it's long overdue. I think it signifies, it's actually a win for the Biden administration, because it's something that they promised they'd do something about. And it's actually a win for the economy. Now, it may not do a damn thing in the short term, but in the long term, you know, let's revisit these folks that, maybe wanted to buy a house but couldn't because they were saddled with, an extra 10 grand or 20 grand of student loan debt. For a lot of folks, that might be the difference between renting and buying, or buying a a townhome to buying a single family home. So that absolutely helps a lot of Americans. And that's why I'm a proponent of this, even though I know a lot of folks going to have something to say. Jason, what are some of your thoughts?
So, as someone who finished college at a later age, I unfortunately still do have student loan debt. So, kind of a little bit of mixed emotions with this. From an individual standpoint, I had to say I was a little excited to get some of my student loans taken care of because per their qualifications, I would qualify for the 20 grand off. Um, Now, I will say also when it comes to that personal, I was a little disappointed, obviously, because you were thinking that, hey, no more student loans at all. We're done, taken care of. Which, hindsight being 2020, probably was a little ridiculous to think that. So from that personal standpoint, yes, 20 grand for me at least coming off, provided I get it, will be pretty great. You still have to apply for it, stuff like that. I'm not sure if there's a cutoff when it comes to how many people are going to get that amount of money taken off. They haven't really announced that yet. The application hasn't even been released yet, so there is that. Now, I do have to say that the other side of this, which is where I said I was kind of torn, was so basically, according to an NPR article, Americans currently owe about $1.6 trillion in federal student loans. Now, again, all that's not getting canceled. But again, if everybody who owes that money is getting at least 10 grand, there's 43 million borrowers. Do the math. So that's a lot of money that the government's losing out on. I mean, Department of Education, that's still part of the government. So my thought on that is, and this some people may think this is kind of conspiracy theorist in me. The government's gonna get that money back somehow, right? They're not gonna just start missing, say we'll say half a trillion bucks, whatever it is. They're gonna get their money back. Just like when they give out all those, stimulus checks, all of a sudden things started going up in inflation, right? So that was kind of my other thing, and obviously that's one of the concerns with other people is that that the cost of all this stuff is going to fall back on everyone else, even people who didn't even get student loans or people, stuff like that. So from that perspective, I get it because again, the government's going to get their money back at somehow. It may not be something we see visually. They're not going to say, "Hey, we're raising your taxes because of this." Probably not going to say that. So so I have initially mixed emotions when it comes to that. But again, I guess from a personal standpoint, provided I get that qualification that I think I'm going to get based off what they say, I'm happy. But I'm really interested to see, okay, once all this stuff happens, where we see any effects on it on society everywhere else. I believe people have to get applied by December of next year to get qualified for this. I mean, obviously, you can still apply this year whenever it comes out. I believe a couple articles I saw said that it's going to be a few weeks before the application even gets put out. It said maybe November potentially. Um, but yeah, those are my initial thoughts. Now, Terrence, I kind of hinted earlier that there are some people that didn't like it. Have you heard or seen either personally or just in writing on articles why people say they aren't in favor of this, besides anything I mentioned? You're muted.
Jason, can you repeat that?
I was saying that have you seen or heard either personally or in articles what any reasons people might have given as to why they feel like this is a bad idea?
Well, most people usually say that it's a bad idea because, well, Um, well, since I had to suffer, so does everybody else. That's typically the response that I see. Is that, well, since I had to endure this, that, and the third, everybody else got to be miserable as hell too. Um, I I think my initial response to that is, if an American has more buying power, well, ultimately they'll also have more taxable income, won't they? That's why I'm not buying any, you know, conspiracy theory, because instead of this shit going to Sally Mae, it's it's still going somewhere. And the average consumer might have some extra breathing room. Maybe they invest that into the stock market. I don't know. Every person's different, but I don't think there's going to be this earth shattering, um, or economy altering, you know, sort of impact. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's going to. Anytime folks like to act like, "Ooh, these people got away with something," people love to bandy about how that's going to change anything. I don't feel like it's going to change anything. If you First off, loan payments been on pause for hell because of COVID 2 years, and so a lot of folks was like, "The hell do I look like paying this shit early?" Because elections have consequences, and in this situation, uh, the consequence is a positive one for a lot of Americans that borrowed to get ahead. They invested to get ahead. You know. So the the other response I see, and this is just standard political fuckery anyway, is people like politicians who like to say, "Oh, it's preposterous that we that we're not expecting these loans to be paid back," ignoring the fact, this is my favorite part of the student loan, um, uh, debt reduction, is that the White House Twitter account was going at um, politicians, basically saying, "Listen, I know for a fact your ass got some loans forgiven for PPE. Don't play in my face today." That I enjoyed. That's what you should do when you see politicians basically just trying to pander. Like, these people aren't nearly as small government as they like to let a lot of us to believe. They just like government to do something else for them. So,
Well, regarding the whole political side of that, one thing that I was reminded of by an insider article is that last year, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi stated on her own accord that Joe Biden didn't have the authority to cancel any student loan debt. So now some GOP lawmakers, 94 of them to be exact, are calling on Pelosi to stand by her actually public comments about that, to go at Joe Biden and say, hey, you don't have the power to do this. Now, whether or not she does anything about it or says anything about it, I guess that's a good question: is does he really have the power to do this?
I mean, you don't initiate something like this unless you have the power to do it.
Well, well, let me put it this way. So Again, that's the political side of this. But of course, there's the general citizen consumer side of this when it comes to people who say they don't like it. You mentioned a little bit of this. Is that one big thing people say is this doesn't help anybody who's already paid off their student loans. Like I already paid my student loans off. What about my help? Blah 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 blah. There's that aspect to it, which I kind of get. Not that I agree, but I kind of get. Some people say parents are screwed because again they paid their stuff off early. Some people just say it's simply wrong. Some people say that it does nothing to solve the runaway cost of education in this country in the first place, which I'm not going to argue with that point at all. Some people stand up and say, "Hey, it's my debt. I chose to take it on. It's my problem, not the government's problem. You took the debt out. You should be able to take care of it yourself." Also, another kind of an addendum to that, people say that, "Hey, or maybe you should have thought about not taking out or going to a college to where you knew you couldn't afford to go, and then put yourself in so much debt after you got the degree. Like if you can only afford your local community college, you'll be going to Harvard. Um, which is what it is. Now, coming back a little bit to the political side, some people say Joe Biden's only doing this to buy votes. Because obviously he's going up for re-election at some point. So he's just doing this to buy votes. Which, if it does get called out that he doesn't have the power to do this, the fact that he still tried still can give him those votes.
I, I, I,
Well,
I don't. I don't look at. I don't even look at it as buying votes. I look at it as, even if you approach this from a pragmatic perspective, the reality is, let's just say if somebody had, let's just throw out a random ass number, $500 a month. If you had $500 a month in student loans, and now magically that number goes from 500 to 50. These are just random numbers I put out there. You're going to sit there and tell me that 450 isn't going to go back into the economy somehow, some way, that somehow it's not going to make its way into and be redistributed as tax dollars?
I'm actually glad you brought that up because that's one point I did want to bring up is that not only are people getting their some of their student loans debt canceled, also per the NPR article, they did mention that people will also have the opportunity to have their payments reduced more based off of their actual income. And like you say, random numbers 500 to 50. Obviously that's probably not going to happen, but I agree with you when it comes to that. You mentioned people will be able to buy houses and stuff like that. I think that's probably going to be a big part too. If your payments go from reality go from 500 to 250, that could be a big difference there as well. So because that's a lot. That's been a complaint for a lot of people is that their payments are way higher than what they're actually able to afford based off their income. I'm not going to name any names, but there was a gentleman I used to work with who was paying off the student loans, and I remember he was saying that his student loans payments are $800 a month, but he's only making 40 grand a year. So, exactly. I mean, you guys can do the math. I mean, 40 grand, it's. I think that's above the median income, but $800 a month. Do the math there, folks. So for example, I mean, he's in a different position now, which is probably making more money, but still, people in that same situation getting that, if they were to be able to get that cut in half, that's huge. Whether you're trying to buy a house or not, that's still huge. That gives you a life, maybe where you're not living paycheck to paycheck anymore. So that's important. And again, from an individual standpoint, this is a good thing from an individual standpoint. Again, going back to what I was saying originally, and I'll go ahead and let it go. We can move on. I just kind of wonder what is going to be the result of this, because again, the government's going to get their money, $1.6+ trillion. If that were to get cut in half,
nothing from nothing leaves nothing, dog.
Just saying.
Oh man. All right. And with that said, that concludes our first segment on the student loan reduction by the Biden administration. Coming up next, we're talking about the VMAs on Cal Park Bros.